In this video, we're going to take a closer look at gender inequality, specifically in the context of work, both paid and unpaid. And we're also going to look at three approaches that could be used to achieve gender equality, compare and contrast them, see how they're similar or different, and also address their strengths and their shortcomings. So the main goal of this presentation is to, like I said, compare, contrast, and critique three different approaches towards achieving gender equality in the realm of work. So gender inequality in work, here's what we know. First and foremost, we know that women are still expected to complete what's called the second shift at home, meaning that even though women are entering the workforce at the paid workforce at comparable rates to men, women are still tasked with completing the majority of unpaid work when they return home. Things like cooking, cleaning, taking care of the children, etc. So here's just a little data from a recent survey here that shows the hours of unpaid work completed in the United States by gender. So per day, women on average complete 4 hours of unpaid work. Men, however, only complete 2.5. So that's a difference of 1.5 hours. Women complete 1.5 extra hours of unpaid work in comparison to men in the United States every day. So over the course of a week, that translates to an additional 10.5 hours that women complete of unpaid work, and that results in an additional 546 hours of unpaid work each year that women complete. That's 23 days of additional unpaid work that women do every year in comparison to men. So I just present it in terms of days here so you can really help wrap your mind around how much additional work that extra 1.5 hours every day ends up being over the course of a year. Okay. We also know that there is still a significant gender wage gap in the United States, meaning that women get paid less than men, and this is true regardless of any occupation. There's not a single occupation in the United States where a woman gets paid more than a man, right? So currently, the US Bureau of Labor estimates that women get paid 82 cents to the man's dollar, right? So there's an 18 cents discrepancy here. However, it's important to point out that this statistic, like many statistics, is somewhat whitewashed, right? It's specifically white women that are getting paid 82 cents to the man's dollar. Women of color get paid significantly less. African American women only make 68 cents to the white man's dollar, and Latino women only make 62 cents to the white man's dollar. So this is really important to note here, right? This is why as sociologists, while we might specialize and study something like race or gender, etc., we really need to approach all social problems through a lens of intersectionality, which is the theory that suggests that the intersections of social identities, things like race, class, and gender, result in specific systems of discrimination and disadvantage, right? So another way to think of this is that we can't just talk about gender inequality in a vacuum as if it's its own unique separate entity. We also always need to take into consideration how other variables such as race, socioeconomic status, ability, etc., all intersect and affect the unique circumstances and create unique systems of inequality and discrimination. The other thing we know about gender inequality with regards to work is that women experience what's called a motherhood penalty in the paid workforce. So this motherhood penalty essentially finds that when women in the workforce have children, they get paid less. However, when men in the workforce have children, they get paid more. So women experience a motherhood penalty, but men actually experience a fatherhood bonus or a fatherhood premium, as it's often referred to in the literature. So by and large, we see here that women experience a lot of inequality both in paid and unpaid work currently in the United States. We're now going to take a look at three different theories here that purport different ideas to achieve gender equality. And these theories we're going to refer to as equal access, equal value, and equal sharing. So start with the equal access approach. The equal access approach recognizes that there's sexism currently existing in our society today, specifically in the form of unique barriers that women face that they need to overcome just so they can try and be on the same playing field as men. So the equal access approach argues that to end sexism, we need to eliminate legal barriers and reduce sex discrimination. So an example of this would be creating laws that guarantee equal access to education and prohibit gender discrimination in the workplace. And indeed, we do have laws like this in place. It is illegal to discriminate in the workplace based off of gender. But why does gender inequality continue to exist? If these laws are in place to get rid of these barriers that women are supposed to face, why do we still see such bad gender inequality in the workforce? Well, this is one of the shortcomings of the equal access approach. Guaranteeing equal access does not guarantee equal entry. Right? Laws may address sexism, but they don't encourage people to value femininity. So one example of this, if gender inequality didn't exist anymore, right, despite there being equal access to certain jobs, we would expect men and women to get hired relatively equally in all positions. But we know this isn't the case. We're going to watch a quick video clip here that demonstrates this.
We have news tonight about women in the workplace, the day after the first woman became CEO of a big auto company. The hard fact is that women run only 4% of companies in the Fortune 500, and a new study shows almost twice as many women as men say they've been turned down for a job because of their sex. So is there a way to capture what's happening on tape? Looking at two people in a job interview, the only difference, their gender? Well, here's ABC's Cecilia Vega.
He's the boss, she's bossy. The negative way women are perceived at the office in a new ad for Pantene that's gone viral. It's hit a nerve, so we set out to find the truth. Are women who act exactly the same as men seen differently? Listen to this woman. How do you feel about her as a job candidate?
I know the Windows operating systems like the back of my hand, no problem.
Now, listen to him.
I know the Windows operating systems like the back of my hand, no problem.
The candidates in these videos are actors in a Yale University hiring experiment. The resumes identical. The interviews identical.
I'm extremely good at
sizing up people quickly and then delegating responsibility accordingly.
The only difference is gender. But when it comes to who got the job,
I thought the male applicant had better soft skills. I'd say the woman was arrogant and overselling.
In hundreds of evaluations, the female job seekers come off as more aggressive, are rated less likable, and they're less likely to be hired.
Isn't it a catch-22? You're supposed to be strong to get that job, and you're saying if you're too strong, you won't get it. You need to behave in this dominant way to advance as a woman in the workplace, but you're seen negatively because that's not how we expect women to behave.
And if you think this is just male bias, it's not. Both men and women doing the hiring made the same call.
I think there's a level of arrogance that might be okay to be a manager, but then there's a step above, and I thought she was slightly above that.
So let's talk. And when we revealed our study results,
I was surprised by my reaction.
What does that say about us?
We have a long way to go.
a science experiment with real-life lessons about who gets the job, who gets passed over, and why. Cecilia Vega, ABC News, New Haven, Connecticut.
Liberty, 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 liberty. Right, so what that video shows us here is that we do have gender bias against women in our society, and that it's not only men that have that bias, it's women as well. All right, so further studies have been replicated similar to this one, and consistent results have been reported. For example, in 2014, hundreds of large companies were asked to review resumes with identical credentials, so the same premise that was used in this experiment that we just saw in the video. So everything on the resume is the same. The only thing different is the person's name. When the name was Simon, the individual was considered eligible for an interview for the position 62% of the time. But when the name was Susan, she was only considered eligible 56% of the time, right? So we see here again, identical credentials, identical education, identical work experience, the only thing different being a name, women are less likely to be considered for jobs in comparison to men. So just because we have equal access to jobs, meaning that women legally can't be discriminated against, they still are. They still are experiencing this bias. So equal access does not guarantee equal entry. We also talked a little bit before about how women experience a motherhood penalty. Several studies have found that mothers experience major disadvantages in the workforce in comparison to men, and specifically fathers. One study found that mothers were labeled as being less competent and less committed in comparison to non-mothers. Non-mothers were 8.2 times more likely to be recommended for promotion than mothers, right? 8.2 times more likely. So we can see that having children makes women be viewed as less competent workers. And arguably the reason behind that is that in our society, we have this expectation that when a couple has a child, if it's a man-woman couple, it's going to be predominantly the woman's responsibility to take care of that child. So if women are expected to be more focused on parenting, if they're expected to have more obligations outside of work, they get viewed as being less competent workers as a result. Let's now talk a little bit about the equal value approach. So this approach, the goal is to end sexism by making society view or value women in femininity the same amount as men in masculinity. So to do this, we need to recognize men's work and women's work as being different but equal. Okay. So an example would be requiring all employers in the US to provide paid maternity leave to women. It may surprise you to see that the United States is the only country in the developed world, that does not mandate employers offer paid leave for new mothers, right? The only country, right? So technically in the US, women can't get fired for taking time off of work when they have a child, but they're not guaranteed to get paid for that time off. In comparison, look at some of these countries over here. Finland, our good friend, right, with the excellent educational system, also, not surprisingly, has an excellent paid care system here. Mothers in Finland can take 3 years off of work and get paid time off when they have a child, right? So again, the United States lagging very far behind on a lot of these measures in comparison to other industrialized nations. Shortcomings of this: paying women for maternity leave does not necessarily mean society will view unpaid work, specifically raising children, as valuable as employment. Centuries of patriarchy in the US have instilled in us that men's work is of greater value than women's work. And again, we see a lot of studies that are supporting these claims. A 2017 survey found that even when employers offered paid time off for maternity leave, only 66% of women take all available paid leave that they're offered. Another study found that the longer women take off when they have a child, the less likely they are to be considered for promotions and raises when they return to work. So women know that there's this stigma attached towards being a mother in the workforce, and as a result, it's causing them to take less time off because they don't want to be considered less valuable employees when they do return to the workforce. The last approach, equal sharing, here argues that to end sexism, we need to have men and women share equal responsibility for all tasks, with the end game being that eventually there won't be women's work and men's work. Everything will just be gender neutral. An example of this, to help achieve this, would be offering incentives for men, not only women, but also men, to take paternity leave and to complete more unpaid work at home. So again, to kind of get rid of these gender stereotypes we have on certain behaviors and chores. Some countries are doing a great job of encouraging men to take time off. For example, Iceland has a use it or lose it policy. So essentially in Iceland, man-woman couples are offered 9 months of parental leave. However, 3 of those 9 months must be taken off by the father. So if he doesn't take off the 3 months, the mother can only take off 6. But if he takes off 3, potentially a parent could stay at home with the child for the first 9 months of the child's life. A study that's been measuring the effectiveness of this policy found that Iceland had healthier father-child relationships as a result of this particular policy, and also there's more equality between men and women in the paid workforce as well. Shortcomings, however, offering men incentives to participate in less valued women's work doesn't necessarily mean that they will. Another study found that even when men are offered paid time off for paternity leave, only 36% of them actually take it. Again, men recognize the stigma of not being in the workforce. Not being in the workforce makes you be viewed as less competent, less valuable of a worker. And of course, according to conflict theory, men know they have power in this particular dynamic. They want to maintain that power. Right, so applying conflict theory, we understand that men don't want to give up their position at the table. They like having the power. So here are 3 different approaches: equal access, equal value, and equal sharing. What are some actions we can take in our own lives to help promote gender equality in work? Maybe something that we can discuss in the discussion board for this